How to write a solo show. I love when we start a class where people have some hardcore questions. It's 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 the most amazing thing ever. Okay? People write solo shows because they have something to say. You're the person at the party that ends up around the table talking and everybody is wrapped in your story. You're the person that journals constantly. You're the person that sees a movie and then leaves the movie, takes out your journal, and is like, I have an idea for a screenplay. You're the person that has family members that can tell a story so well that when you go to their house, nobody even bothers to turn on the TV because you come from a generation or several generations of natural storytellers. You're the person who goes to church and you're involved in the dance ministry and you teach Bible school and you're proselytizing because you're a storyteller, right? And solo shows take lots of different forms. And throughout this weekend, I'm going to show you a few forms so that we can talk about structurally what the differences are and how you market them. So the first format that everybody knows, and I get this question all the time, is stand-up. The best stand-up comedians are storytellers. Sunset Strip with Richard Pryor. Whoopi Goldberg's on Broadway with the little girl the little black girl wants to have blonde hair. John Leguizamo. Both of his shows are great story. It's not just standing there telling jokes. It's story. There's a story. And it makes it a story because there's a person who's the star of the story. They have a problem that they need to solve. Whether it be get your child into college because they live in the hood and you don't want them to become a drug dealer, whether it's you're trying to sign up for the poetry slam. Sarah Jones's shows is about this. You're trying to sign up for the poetry slam, and because you're handicapped, they don't have access for you to get into the theater, right? Bridge and Tunnel is a story like that. It's a moment and a slice of life. And sometimes people feel like, oh, I don't want to write a story. I don't want to tell my business. I don't want to have therapy. I don't want to be self-indulgent. I don't want to worry about what people say. What if my family gets upset? Blah, 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 blah. We have 10,000 reasons why we aren't writing, and that's why we're not writing. Let me say that again. We have 10,000 reasons why we're not writing, and that's why we're not writing. You pick up the pen, you put it to the paper, you write. That's it. What comes up is what comes up. If you just got off the phone with your friend for 20 minutes, guess what? You just told a story. Record it. Right? It's not that deep. And some of the things that get in the way are reasons why you're not writing it. You're worried what other people will think. You're putting all these carts before the horse because you haven't written it yet. And I truly and firmly believe that if you have an agenda for your story, I want to write a feminist play. I want to write, the reason it's not written is because that's not the story that your heart wants to tell. The story your heart wants to tell, if you come to the page every day for 10 minutes, will emerge. It's the everyday pieces of your life. Stories can be told in the first person. When you go see an author at Barnes & Noble's do a reading of their book, guess what? That's a solo show. They are reading a story to you. Right? When you listen to NPR and you listen to performers on NPR sing a song, that's a solo show because that song is a story. Go look at the lyrics. When you go to the Moth and somebody tells you about their first love, that's a solo show. When you watch a TED Talk that has a beginning, middle, and an end, and the person tells you how they're changed by the end, or you're changed by the end, that's a solo show. So some of the things that get in the way is we have an agenda for our writing that has nothing to do with the story our heart wants to tell. And two, we have a very limited idea of what solo work is. If you've written a memoir, if you have short stories and you read them out loud, that's a solo show that can be sold to the Fringe Festival, New York Fringe, Edinburgh Fringe, any Fringe in the UK. You can do it at church. You can do it for Women's History Month, Black History Month, Asian History Month, Pride Month, at the local library or at the local university, or your sorority has their annual conference. There are so many ways to do a solo show that we limit ourselves, and it stops us from 1, starting, 2, finishing, 3, monetizing it. You just have to have the desire to come to the page and brainstorm every day. And by brainstorming, I mean writing longhand. I have solved so many of my business problems by my habit that I have created of coming to the page every single day, no matter what, if I have nothing to say, if I'm just going to bitch and moan, and committing to staying on that page. For me, it's about 15 pages, but it started as 3. That is where I solve problems. That is where I start stories. That is where I figure out, how can I monetize this? Oh, let me go online and see people telling stories. And I discovered First Person Story Festival. Well, let me send my script there. They don't even want the whole thing. They want 5 pages, right? Story is 5 minutes of a person standing there talking. I'm doing a solo show right now. This is my solo show. How easy it is to write a solo show. My first solo show was the first moments in my life that I remember that changed me. That's how I began writing. I'd say, oh, okay, the first time somebody told me I was a liar. That's the first 5 minutes of my show. If you've seen my TED Talk, that's what it is. The format of a TED Talk is a great solo show, right? A problem, and then 3 examples of how you solve this problem. And by the end, the speaker tells you how it will change your life and how it changed their life. Solo show. 17 minutes. Really simple. Really simple. So let me look at these questions that I have here. And if you have more while I'm talking, please go to chat and send it to me. Okay. Okay. So I had a great question from Cian, which was, I have a solo show. I don't know if it's still relevant. I don't know what I should do with it. There's a couple of things you could do. And this also goes to Earl's question of memorization. You need to read the show out loud. If you read your show out loud every day, if you have time, 2 or 3 times a day, the entire show, it will be memorized. Every day. Every single day. 2, read the show out loud. Invite your friends over to watch. Do it on Zoom. Schedule a reading on Zoom. Read it out loud. Don't record it. Read it out loud. For you to feel it and to have someone to talk to. And I call that my storytelling circle. When you invite people to your house or you have a Zoom party and you have faces, eyes that you can look into and talk to, and treat the story, the solo show, like a conversation that you're having with your friends. Okay? You have Facebook Live? Go on Facebook Live. Read sections of it. Go on Instagram Live. Read sections of it. Go on YouTube. Read 5 minutes of it. Or read the whole thing and then make it unlisted and only give the link to people you love. But mostly, you reading your story out loud, looking into someone else's eyes, will tell you where it needs work. Read it over and over and over and over and over and over again. Okay? That's how you figure out what works and what doesn't. And you read it to regular people. I sent out a blog about 2 weeks ago called 10 questions to ask your friend about something you've written. If you didn't see it, go back in your email. It's my Badass Writers blog. It's a great post. You can use those 10 questions after the reading so that you guide what you want to hear from people. Okay? So, I've answered memorization. Read it out loud. every day. Read it out loud every day. This is particularly important for solo shows because it is a first person kind of art form where you're standing there talking to people. Usually I would say write it down by hand, but actually the repetition of reading it out loud, like you're talking to someone, like activating the text, I find is the most powerful way to memorize it. So before my show premiered off Broadway, I had read that show, I'd done readings of it everywhere I could find somebody that would listen. Poetry readings, bars, clubs, writers' residencies. I also hired an actor to read it for me, which is a really strong strategy, CN, for an existing show. If you want to make changes, find an actor who is a solo performer. If you got to think about it, they ain't a solo performer. The first person that comes to mind is the most charismatic chameleon-like actor you know. Ask them to read it. Pay them. And record it if they're okay with that. You will learn more about your show than any place else. The next question is monetizing a solo show. Everything that I've told you so far is exactly how you monetize it. And I had a long conversation with Katie about accountability and finishing something. Before I've written any play, I had a place where people could find me and find out about my work. I mean, now I have an agent and a website. At the time, and I have plays. At the time, I didn't have all that, right? You know what I did first? I got an Instagram account and I told people about my play. Then I built a website and I told them what the play was going to be about when there was no play yet. I think there was one monologue, right? I opened a LinkedIn account. I created a Facebook page and I started posting images of what I wanted to write about. I didn't know what the play was yet, but I gave a place to find out about my work and say, this is what I want to write about. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet, but here's this beautiful image of the house at the turn of the century where my great 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 grandmother had a store. I wrote about what I wanted to write about. Okay? And my Instagram exploded. I just posted images. I was like, I want to write about these Gullah people. I want to write about a Cuban family. And this picture inspired me. Oh, this painter inspired me. Right? The act of writing about the play and finding imagery that was inspiring my writing is where some of the best stories happened. I began some of those stories in those posts. And the thing about creating a place for people to find you is that it keeps you accountable to finish. Because people are going to ask, where's the play about this? And I thought you said you were going to do a memoir. Where's that? Because you've been writing about it. And having a place for people to find your work also ensures that you are writing every day. It's a win-win. There are tons of ways to monetize a play. I did a Kickstarter for my second play, which was not written when I did the Kickstarter. If you go to the video, I think I'll post that. If you go to the video, I talk about what I want to write about. I tell stories from this very particular neighborhood in where I grew up and its history. And I start telling stories based on what I read that day. Right? So when I wanted to write this play, I started reading about that neighborhood. I went and got this book, The History of Black Miami by Dr. Marvin Dunn. I would read a chapter, I would see pictures, I go, oh, that's amazing, I know where that is. And then I would write a blog post about it. And it would trigger a memory. And I would continue writing that blog post in my journal until it ended up being a story. Right? So I tell stories. I learned in that book, for example, public schools for Black people didn't exist in Miami until 1953. That's crazy. And then there was only one. For people for like 100 miles, there was like one. And I wrote about that in a post. And I was like, I'm going to learn more about that. And I where I was like, what do I want to know? I want to know date. I want to know time. I want to know the building. I did some research. Then I called my dad. I contacted the guy who wrote that book. He's a professor at University of Miami, and the stories that he told me, I was like, what? He's like, you know that building on such and such and such and such. I was like, yeah, I know, a building I used to buy candy there. He's like, well, that building used to be, and I wrote, right? Read about what you want to write about. You don't have to know the story. I didn't know the story at the time that I built the website, that I even did the Kickstarter. I just knew that I was reading about my hometown and its founding and how exciting the stories were. Because people were scandalous in the place called Good Bread Alley, because there was a place called Good Bread Alley where black people lived in Colored Town, and it was right next door to the Wholesome Bakery Factory. Black people could work in the back of the Wholesome Bakery Factory. They came in through the back entrance. They could not go through the front, and they could not buy bread at the Wholesome Bread Factory. But this neighborhood where my great grandmother grew up was right next door. So all the black people would wake up smelling this bread that they couldn't have. And I thought, that's amazing and totally fucked up. Wait, tell me more about this place. I was like, if crazy stuff happened there, I can imagine you're hungry. You live in a shack on cement cinder blocks. You have an outhouse, and there's a bread factory next door in the middle of the Depression, and you can't have none of the bread. That's a recipe for a crazy street. And indeed, it was. It was a crazy street. People were starving and struggling and trying to survive. That story stuck in my mind. That was the beginning of it. And I just kept reading about it, going to my journal, and writing about it. The story that wanted to be told emerged. And then I shared it on social media. Iris, is that the term you eating white bread came from? Oh, no, not that I know of. Um, yeah, not that I know of. So, writing every day, sharing what you're learning, and then whatever your medium is that you're going to post, pick one and concentrate on that one. For me, it was Facebook and then Instagram. I just write, did you know? Right? Write out that story on Facebook and then finish my feelings about it in my journal. Or record and then immediately transcribe that. After a year of doing that, and then having people come to my house once a month, and I would do storytelling circles, where I'd have my friends come over and prompt me. I'd be like, okay, so my grandmother's story is this, blah, 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 blah. And then I went to grad school, and then da 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 da, and they'd be like, what happened? I asked them to always make me clarify who, what, when, where, and then I recorded 6 hours. At the end of the year, I had 500 pages of raw transcript. I pulled the related themes from that transcript and began putting together a solo show, which was 50 pages long. But there were 3 or 4 plays in those 500 pages. You monetize it by finding a medium to share what you're learning as you're writing. YouTube. That how to write a solo show video that I wrote on YouTube has, I mean, I was just talking. I was like, it's got tons of hits, and it turned into people writing me going, can you coach me? You know, that was for one class that I taught a really long time ago. I didn't know that it was going to turn into, oh, your brand is how to teach solo shows. And I've done writers' retreats all over the world and coached dozens of solo shows from that one video. Just by going to a place, pick a place on social media where you feel comfortable sharing. That's how you draw the money to you. That's how you draw the opportunities to you.
Can I ask,
Sure.
April, how does that actually happen? So I can't understand because I don't do social media, but I'm prepared to in order to promote the show. Yeah, how does posting about your ideas and development and all that, how does that turn into money? How does that monetize it?
Because people who are looking for performers, storytellers,
Yeah,
go searching the same way you found me.
yeah,
Solo show. I also submitted my first 15 pages everywhere. So I went to a drama bookstore in New York City and I got the guide to regional theaters and I sent my first 15 pages to 45 theaters in the United States. Then I Googled writing residencies in the United States. And then I applied to about 25 writing residencies and play development workshops. At the time, I was acting all over the world. Every time I got a gig, I would ask the folks where I was doing the gig, hey, can I do a reading of my play one night? And you invite everybody in town? So I read it at Williamstown Theater Festival. I read it at Alabama, not Alabama Chicks, at ACT. I read it at Seattle ACT. I read it at New York Theater Workshop. I read it like I invited the public to a reading at New York Theater Workshop. I read it at Dartmouth. I read it at the New York Stage and Film. I read it everywhere for free. Every theater that I worked at, every church that asked me, so when you do plays, the Black History Month play, the Women's Month play, you're always going to do a promo in a church in that town. Great Lakes Theater Festival. I would ask, oh, can I read from my play? I went to open mic nights. I went to summer stage. Hey, can I read my play? I never stopped talking about my play. So once you are in the milieu of where people tell stories, the more that you let them know you're here, the more opportunities to perform the play there are. And every time you perform it or talk about it, people go, well, where can I find you? You have to give them a place to find you. You have to pick an ad and then advertise in one of those places. But at first, I didn't advertise. I just shared how excited I was about the story. The same way you introduced yourself, Errol, and you told me what the story was about. That was really exciting. Why isn't there a video on YouTube about, I'm writing this play and it's going to be about this? There should be. And then a place for people to contact you to learn more about it. You begin building a mailing list. But most importantly, you give places for people to see you reading portions of your play. You can set up a Patreon page if you want, where people can donate to help you finish writing it. I did a Kickstarter, but I didn't do a Kickstarter until I had spent 4 or 5 years applying to stuff so people knew me. Like I raised $100,000 in 30 days with my Good Bread Alley platform, but that's because I had spent a decade telling people what I wanted to write about. Like I had a following. I had 5,000 Facebook followers. I had 3,000 at that time Instagram followers. Now I have 7. Like I took that shit seriously. Like I was in it. I did not miss a day of talking about my work. That's how you monetize it. And eventually, all those places that I applied to, Sundance, the Lark Play Development Center, New York Stage and Film Play Development, all of those places, if they took me, I had a reading, I would do the reading there. I would have a sign up sheet at the table for the reading, have people sign up, and then keep them posted, send them blog posts, direct them to my Instagram, I never stopped talking about my play and I built a following. All of those places that turned me down passed my play onto someplace else. That's how.
And then eventually a theatre or someone will come along and pay you to perform it. Is that the idea?
Yes, of course. I've been writing that theater every month, sending them something new about my play. Like, I had very specific goals of where I wanted to perform my play. There were two theaters that I was targeting. So those theaters, I got involved in the community at those theaters. I did readings for free at those theaters so that when I had a play and I asked them, hey, I've been going to upstate to do these retreats with you guys and read plays for other people. Can I read a section for my play? Sure. Can I invite other theaters? Sure. And then I wrote everyone on my email list. Do you know someone in the theater world who will come to my play reading? I packed the house with supporters, but I also packed the house with theater makers and decision makers. So there were 3 artistic directors at that reading. At the end, one artistic director came up to me and said, I really like this. Are you interested in doing your play here? It was really like incredible. Like that never happens. But I set it up. I wrote every playwright I knew, every Pulitzer Prize winning writer I knew, and said, listen, I'm doing this reading this day. Can you get so and so in the room? So when you have 3 off Broadway artistic directors in the room, something's going to happen because they're looking at each other going, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? What are you doing here? So a bidding war happened. And I got my play done. Again, the first thing I did was give people a place to find me and talk about the play. It doesn't have to be done. So, for example, you have this play that's happening in the prison system in the 90s, Errol?
Yeah, it's in the 80s. So it's set in the 80s. This is the time of slop out when there were no sinks and toilets in the cells. Everyone had a bucket. There was overcrowding and
Okay.
people were doing really long sentences for minor shit.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you. This is the first video I did where I didn't know what I was writing about. Okay? I'm April Thompson. I am the playwright of Good Bread Alley, as well as the producer of this workshop, as well as an actor in the play. Very few people know there was a hurricane in Miami called the Great Hurricane. This play, Good Bread Alley, begins 8 days before the storm. This hurricane wiped out the town as we know it. It left a cholera epidemic in its wake. Of course, all of the wealthy northeastern white families who had summer homes in Miami were gone for the season. So that left Haitian people, Bahamian people, Cuban people, African American people, Gullah people. That opened this window after the storm. And the result was that some black folks came out of that, and some Afro-Latino people were like, oh, well, it's just us. We get to rebuild the town. Let's build it our way. And so in 1926, we have my great-grandmother. And she meets my great-grandfather figure, who is an Afro-Cuban man. This part of Miami is called Colored Town. When you got off the boat as an immigrant, you got sent to Colored Town or you got sent to a white neighborhood based on the way you looked. So what that meant is if you were Cuban and you had a mulatto-looking wife or daughter, they could take your child and give her to somebody else. That's where the play begins. So what'd you learn?
Well, what I've learned is that you are giving people a little taste there. You're like teasing them about what the play is going to be about.
What am I teasing them with?
You're teasing them with unknown stories of their culture, of themselves. So you're telling about themselves and where they came from, and maybe because we're all trying to find ourselves, and some of us find it in the history of our ancestors and stuff.
Right. The play wasn't written yet. I was just reading about the play. I was just reading about the town. That's it. That's all I was doing. And that's exactly what the video is. That was for my Kickstarter, where I was raising money so that I could take a year off, write my play, have some workshops, hire some people to read it out loud so I could see if it worked, hired some musicians to write music, do staged readings, sell tickets, invite people, right? I took a year off. I salaried myself, I salaried my director, I salaried, I got a theater to donate the space. I got a theater to set up the equity contract and act as the producers. Look, I did what needed to be done by telling stories. That's all writing is being a storyteller.
Mm.
So
And
I
so,
got
so it
every
seems
month
like
I was excited about a story. It
it
seems like
seems like you're telling the story. You're telling the story of your play. So the play tells a story, but in that video, it's like you're telling another story about the story of your play, which is really making me think that I definitely need to do a little like 1 minute promotional video where I'm just talking about it and where I got the idea, you know what I mean? And like, yeah.
share it everywhere and
Mm.
ask people to do something. Now that video was an 8-minute Kickstarter video. I was like, I sent that to people before I started the Kickstarter campaign. And I was like, if I do this Kickstarter campaign, can you pledge ahead of time? They'll be like, yeah. I'll be like, how much can you pledge? They'll be like, oh, $500. Okay, great. Then I'm going to start with that $500 and say, today I have someone who's promised me $500 if I can raise $500. So before I even did the Kickstarter, I had 10 people who had agreed to give me $100, $10, and then I did that enough, and one producer picked up the phone and was like, "Let me call my guy, who's my financial advisor." She called him, and he was like, "Oh, well, if we get to like front row seats to the production, we'll pledge $10,000." I was like, "What? What?" And I was like, "He's like, but you got to match that. Can you match 10K?" I was like, "I will get back to you in 48 hours." That's how I did a Kickstarter. I had those promised funds. But again, he was like, "Well, where can I learn about this girl's play?" Then I sent him an email. These are links to 4 different videos. These are links to me reading out loud. There's a reading I'm doing at this day. One guy promised me money. I scheduled a reading for the next day, and I told him the reading had been in the works for weeks. I was like, I was trying to be someplace every month, reading sections of the play or telling stories that would end up in the play to keep it in people's minds. But again, every month there was a reading somewhere. Every day there was a post somewhere, a compelling post of me telling a story about my play. That's how I monetized it. You do that long enough and you look for opportunities, people will show up. But you got to decide, where is your ideal place for this thing to end up? I knew I wanted my play. I had gone and watched solo shows around the country and off Broadway. There were 2 or 3 Whoopi Goldbergs on Broadway and Nalaja's sons, No Child, who I was like, I really like the format of those. Totally complete stories with strong beginning, middle, and end. Protagonist that's changed by the end. All right, I was like, I don't know if I want the monologue format, if I want the one continuous story like Nalaja does, but let me go watch them. Then I went to the theaters where they were produced. I went and saw stuff at Ars Nova, the Public, New York Theater Workshop. I started looking at the work of these people. And I said, I want my play to be done at either New York Theater Workshop or the Public. And every play I went to at the end, I would talk to the person and say, how did you get this produced? And they were like, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to do a well-made story that's a solo show, and I would like to do it at New York Theater Workshop or the Public. They were like, you're very specific. I was like, because that's going to help me determine how I need to market it to get them interested. I need to brand my play in a way that resonates with their work. It's easier with a theater, right? If you're going to do the Moth or you're going to do a TED Talk, where do you want this to end up? That's how you determine where you market it. Okay. So for me, being on social media, and my strongest theater contacts were in Facebook. that and the internet, the emails and stuff. But Facebook first. I was like, all the theater people I know are on Facebook. Let me make sure I'm in all the groups that all of my contacts in the New York theater world are. That's where I focused. Not on where I'm from, my hometown, Miami. New York theater, because I knew the theater that I wanted my play to produced in was in the Lower East Side of New York, in the off Broadway nonprofit kind of funky hippie. That's the aesthetic of those theaters. I was like, that's where I need to be. So I started with Facebook and all the theater groups, where of course all the casting people, all the actors, all the artistic directors, all the directors, all the associate artistic directors, all those people are on social media in theater groups. It's like you could talk to the star of Broadway play on Facebook today. Like, you can talk to the Tony winners on their Instagram page today. All of the people that could help me get my play produced were already in one place where I had a following. So I started posting every day on my page and in all the groups where those people were. And people started talking about my work. They're like, this girl won't stop talking about her play. I was like, right. And I've been working for you and collecting unemployment for 10 years so you can give me a reading. Right? You have to decide what world you want your story to land in and then become a part of that world and give that world a place to find you where all those people meet. Casting actors of color, New York City Black Theater Network, that hey, they're there. Classical Theater of Harlem on their page, sharing. Public Theater has a page. New York Theater Workshop has a page. Second Stage has a page. You need to be involved in those communities and sharing your work. And then you need to pick a place every month live to go perform a section of it or just talk about it. You could talk about what I learned today. Did you know that there was just a bucket and people did not even have bathrooms? That's compelling. I'm writing
So
about
I'm doing that at the moment. So I go to scratch nights. I'm always finding them and I just turn up or you pay the fiver. Sometimes you have to pay them and I just go. Sometimes it's only a fiver. I just go and I perform the bits that I know, just to get it on its feet and see how it feels.
it. Do you send out email announcements and post on social media to let people know
I
I'm going to?
can hear just by talking to you that that's what I should be doing because I just think to myself, if I mess it up, I mean, because, there's these little groups, I just go by myself. I've got one other person. Sometimes she comes with me. Otherwise, I just go by myself and I do it. And I always get a good response, even though in England, though, you get a good response. You can fight with them and you'll get a good response. But, I always feel that it's a genuine good response. But yes, I'm going to start doing that. For the next one, I'm going to invite.
With a sign up list.
So I say that again, so.
Make sure you leave every event with a sign up list with people's names and emails and then keep them up to date. I did a monthly newsletter. My monthly newsletter was April and May, April and June, April and April, April and yeah, I know it was a lot, but people loved it. People would always respond. They're like, "Oh, you're there, right?" Coca-Cola has not stopped making commercials. As an artist, you can't stop making commercials either. All right. Have I answered all the questions? Katie keeps asking me about research. I just told her until you figure out what you're interested in, you don't know what to research. So if there's a theme that you've been talking and writing about, go get a book about it. Read a chapter, write about what you learned in that chapter, and see how it directs your reading. The same way I gave the example of Black Miami. I needed to know about Black Miami. So I got the most renowned book and I was like, I got to know about Black Miami. And I started reading a chapter and I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know there weren't public schools here. And then I posted on Facebook. Then I posted in my blog. My father answered on the blog. He was like, Doc, I know Marvin. I was like, I'm sorry, the man who wrote this book, who's tenured at University. He's like, yeah, I went to school with him. I was like, shut up. My father responded to my blog post. A year later, I was in a car with Dr. Dunn driving through those buildings and him giving me the history live. Live. Just because I wrote about it. And people didn't get sick of me because the stories were interesting. The story didn't entirely end up being about all the things that I learned, but it totally informed my writing. I learned about the place that I wanted to write about. I learned about how people spoke. I learned about what music they listened to. I wrote, I went and into the Florida archives, and archives are an amazing place because much of Black history is in old Black churches. And then old Black churches and sororities and fraternities donate their records to Black archives in their city. You can go in there and you can find flyers. I found a flyer announcing my great grandmother playing piano at a church over town. I found baby shoes. I found a cross dressing man who was a preacher, and he had a boyfriend and a wife, and he had a column in the Black newspaper in the 1920s. I was like, what? I was like, this place is amazing. I found his articles. I found stories that he referred to and nightclubs and places, which I then was like, well, let me go research there. Right? And those were the list of places that when I met Dr. Dunn, I was like, well, I found this guy in, he was a cross dresser. He was like, he was a homosexual with a wife. I said, oh, stop. I was like, what can I learn? He's like, he had a radio show and he had a column. His part of his radio show became a part of my play because I was like, I need an event, in the second act that brings everybody to the dinner table so they can have the big fight. What was his column? And at the time, his column was like TV. Like everybody waited for it to drop. You were like, oh, he gonna tell you who was at the tennis match in Nassau and who's cheating on who. And who got a woman in the White House downtown. It was like amazing. And I shared everything I learned. When I went on the residency, I was like, oh my God, I'm in a car right now with Dr. Dunn, and he's showing me this building, and these were originally slave cabins, and they moved them to a park, and they're in a park in Miami. You can see it right now. I mean, I got people involved in my journey. I have a client, Justine Hall, who has a show called The Iron Butterfly. You can go online and type in Journey to My Solo Show, and her videos will pop up. That was her first assignment coaching with me. She had to make a video every month to talk about her process. Because you know what? You're going to finish. And then she hired me. And we had a 1.5 year coaching program. We had a package. She should pay every month. It got finished. She posted about it every day. She wrote every day. She shared her research every day. She sent me pages every week. She read sections of it for open mics, Black History Month, Women's History Month, theaters, you name it. Because she was paying me every month and she was talking about it everywhere and posting about it. So she had accountability. So she finished it. As she posted, people heard about her. She got work. Some TV work, some voiceover work, just from her visibility. If you build it, they will come. Have I answered all these questions? So I'm going to have to jump off now. Have I answered everything? So I had a question about how to do research. How do you know if you need to do rewrites? Yeah. Any other questions? Hi, Cameron.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi. Tell us why you're here. What you working on?
Um, well, I was working on it wasn't a play per se, but it was just a script that I just decided to start working. I'm really new to it, but it was just an idea that came to me, and I've just been learning from different areas. Like I never written a play or anything, but I just saw this was just an opportunity to learn about it. So I'm just here learning, just to tap into this world and see what I can take from it and apply to other areas.
Okay. All right. Uh, do uh uh do do Okay. Are you an LLC? How did you build a brand? I built a brand by posting every single day. It's just that simple. And what resonated with people, the same way I'm teaching this class to you, I can come and talk to you about solo shows and marketing and producing all fucking day long. That may not be relevant to you. So I would post, and then the post that got people the most excited, I would write more about that. Right? You gotta you gotta write a lot and share a lot about your process before you even know what your brand is gonna be. You can't decide your brand up. If you decide, like I initially was like, I'm going to write a solo show about slave narratives, and I'm going to go to the Library of Congress and download all the slave narratives, and that's what's going to happen. Can I tell you, I have 1,000 pages of slave narratives, 40 different books. I can tell you all about Manning Marable's story of slave culture and day-to-day life and slave sex farms. No slavery show was ever written because I set an agenda for myself. And that I was like, ain't I a woman? Okay, you've got Sojourner Truth. I got the coin. I'm going to write about black feminism. And I had all these agendas. Nothing happened. I got on YouTube. I was like, I want to write a show about this. And the show that wanted to be written showed up. Don't start with an agenda. Don't start with a brand. Start with what excites you. I started telling stories at a birthday party to people and recording them. I didn't know what any of my plays were going to be about. I just started telling stories, recording them, and writing them down and transcribing them. Then after I had about 200 pages, I knew what the story was going to be about. But I kept going so I could get more stories, and then I pieced them all together. I wanted to talk about, in my first play, how the Black Power movement ended because of crack and breaking up black neighborhoods in Miami, and it culminated in the riots, which then urban renewal happened because they were like, let's just break up all these black people from fighting, and we're tired of having the police going in there and killing their children and then them rioting. So they just cut off all the expressway entrances and exits into Liberty City, isolated Liberty City, and turned it into Crackville. Yes, I was very interested in that. I learned that by telling stories about my childhood and what related them. Why was there struggle in my neighborhood? Because there was crack. Why was there crack? Because the Black Power movement had fallen apart. Because all social services were removed from the black community. Because Black Panthers were having free lunch programs. And black doctors were moving their offices back to black neighborhoods. So the largest city of Miami was like, oh no, we can't have them organizing like that. We can't have Black Panthers and Christians meeting at a mosque having meetings. That's not going to happen. Right? It was by telling the stories from where I grew up that I came to understand this is what the politics are. This is how they took the health center out of my neighborhood and fired my dad. Right? I told lots of stories. And then after telling those stories, I was like, well, let me go back and research these riots. Let me go back and research what urban renewal is. Let me go back, and that's how those stories became linked into a story. Is there a good time length to shoot for with a solo show? I would say an hour is ideal. My solo show was 90 minutes because it's an epic about a family. It ended up not being about me. Do I worry about being offensive? Motherfucker is in the first 3 minutes of my show 6 times. And when my family came to see the show, my great aunt said, why you got all that fucking cussing up in there? I swear to God, that's what she said. You got us all up in that cussing. Even the West, why's got all this fucking cussing? And my cousin said, because that's how we talk. If she had people in there that didn't look and sound like us, we'd be like, what is this foolishness? I allow the character and the story to determine how they talk.
In my show, so I've got a load of swearing in my show because, I mean, locker room talk and all that, and it's 80, so it's before anyone was politically correct. They fondly call each other the C word. See, I'm even hesitant to say it now, yeah? So, but they fondly call each other a cunt, yeah? Now, I've read out bits to people and they've said, oh, you've gone a bit really heavy on the C-bombs. You're dropping them all over the place, blah, blah, blah. People's opinions, you know, from all walks of life. However, when you go to theatre and you see enough theatre, and I'm members of various groups, I get free theatre tickets all the time. So I go to see a lot of theatre and they're always cunting and blinding in it. You know what I mean? So sometimes the person giving you the feedback is just from their personal thing where they were told as a child you shouldn't be cussing and swearing, even though they know that it's the reality and it's somewhere. So I have to take those criticisms with a pinch of salt. And I know what it's like when guys get together and they start cussing and swearing. And I'm not going to water that down just because someone says, oh, too many C-bombs.
Motherfucker is not in my TED talk in the first 5 minutes. Every place where he says, what the hell, or what you, is fuck.
Yeah.
But okay, but April. Here, okay,
TED has a policy of no cursing. Like, so Sarah Silverman got to TED and cussed the whole time. They pulled her off the stage, and you've never seen it. And she's been banned from TED.
Yeah. She's done a joke about a disabled baby.
Yeah, if you see public performances of my show anywhere, all the cussing is in it. Because that's what was necessary to tell the story of 1970s Miami and the Black Panthers and Muslim men who went to bat in my community all cussed like sailors while talking about Frantz Fanon. And those were the characters, right? So I gave them that voice. In my play Good Bread Alley, which is about Colored Town, you hear nigga every 20 minutes because that's how they talked. Because it's 1926 Miami, where every black person carries a gun and the Klan is lynching people from the lamppost in front of your door. And my great grandmother had to cut her brother down from a lamppost from being hung while holding a gun in her hand. Listen, that was their world. That's what I write about. I cuss. My mother.
Iris is saying.
My mother's a good Christian. She does not. That's fine for her. It's like somebody emailed me the other day from my Manifesting Like a Motherfucker blog. They were like, I really like your blog, but I can't deal with all the cussing. I was like, the blog is called Manifesting Like a Motherfucker. Why are you here? Let's unsubscribe. Well, can you unsubscribe me? She was already unsubscribed. I was like, so you needed to write me a letter to tell me that you were Christian and chastise me for cussing instead of just unsubscribing. Why do what? Oh, so you're policing me. Fuck you.
I think you might not realize.
And I unblock it because that's about other people. You do what's comfortable for you.
Right. But April, I have a question. I know, here's what I mean, like, because I get it with the language and all that. And if I write something, it's going to be a whole lot of stuff. But what in you was like, oh, I want to read here. Can I read? Can I read my play? Read my play? You were never like, oh, but are they going to like, oh, well, you know, I'd say motherfucker 3 times, 6 times. Were you ever concerned with that energy when you were asking all these people?
With what energy?
No, you know how you said you wanted to read your play everywhere. You asked everybody, could you read your play, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So were you ever like, okay, I'm going to read this play to this crowd out here. They don't know me, but will they get offensive? We're just free flowing. And I'm just, okay, all right.
It's just like I'm an actor. There's, you know, and I was offered a role to be the crackhead mother who came to the door in Law and Order in her underwear with half her titty hanging out high. I was like, not today, sorry. I'm not doing that. Some other actress did it, and she's really happy. I will, if I'm telling this story about this black woman, and I want her to cuss, she gonna cuss.
What if you're doing it in a church or somewhere like that?
I did do it in church. I've done it in several churches, and I read excerpts that didn't have cussing in it because it was Sunday morning on Martin Luther King Day.
And you can't be doing no cussing on Sunday morning on Martin Luther King Day.
I did a very inspirational monologue that was my mom talking about how much she loved my dad. That was much more fitting for where I was. But the show got cussing in it. Or I went, well, what the F you doing? I actually did that at one church. And people were fine with it. I was like, whatever. She was like, given the content, if you're telling a really good story and that language is not gratuitous, then people don't get pressed about it. I read a section in Miami in a school about the riots. And this little girl gets her leg torn off in the riots by a man running into her with a car. And they have to try and get her to the hospital, but they've closed off Miami. And children are lost in school, and buildings are burning, and parents are running into school going, where the fuck is my child? Nobody complained about that cussing because it was a compelling story that actually happened. Right? You're famously doing the thing that other people do. When I did a workshop last week and I gave people a writing assignment, they're like, well, how long are we going to be writing for? What if I offend people? You finding reasons not to write. That's why you ain't written. You write in your journal all day long. You say fuck, 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 fuck. The final the final draft will be, and I fell in love with myself by writing. The fuck might not even be there. But if you're still at finding reasons why not to write, then you won't write. It's actually just that simple. You can always do rewrites. I got another class. So I'm going to see you guys tomorrow. I am going to send you a form, a quiz, a discovery quiz, so that I can learn more about what you're struggling with. I need you guys to fill that out for me tonight. Iris, you did it. You need to be more detailed. If I ask you to paint a picture of what you would like to see in your life, paint that picture. This is a chance to write. Right. I'll send that link to you. You can probably just go through your emails. I've already sent it to you. The Zoom invitation has the link too. Go in, do it, send it to me, and I will speak to that tomorrow morning.
April, I already did it. Do I need to do it again?
It's not detailed enough. I did not just say it's not detailed. Didn't y'all just hear me telling you how detailed enough? Iris, we're gonna get in class.
I know, no, that was
You said
Katie.
Iris.
Katie. No, I'm Iris. How you doing? No, mine was not detailed.
Iris,
This is Katie.
Much as you talk in class, Iris.
No, it was Katie. It was Katie who asked the question.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
This is Katie talking.
Need to hear you in ghetto. See you guys.